Hi, 3DMJers. This is Andrea Valdez, and you are listening to the 3D Muscle Journey podcast. Before we dive into today's episode, just wanted to remind everyone to head over to 3dmusclejourney.com and sign up for our Big 3 newsletter. We call it this because, in case you haven't noticed, our team comes up with 3 new pieces of content every week in the form of 2 articles and 1 podcast episode. Rather than remembering to check back with us 3 times a week, we can send it all to you in one single email every Thursday. This weekly digest also includes direct links to any other content that Team 3DMJ coaches are a part of throughout the entirety of the internet. Whether that's guest appearances, interviews, seminars, or courses, you will not miss any of it. So if you like hearing about all the free resources that we have to offer, all the products we sell, all the projects we are a part of, and all the ways you can get discounts, reminders, and early access to them, head over to 3dmusclejourney.com right now and sign up. Thanks so much for listening and enjoy the show. Today I'm joined by Alberto Nunez and Brad Loomis as we talk about the details that matter for strength training. This episode was sort of supposed to be about recovery, and then it turned into an in-depth discussion about everything else we pay attention to as well. You'll start by hearing Berto give an introduction to our intended topic, hinting that there are a lot of things we do as athletes outside of the gym that help to ensure that our body is rested and ready to perform when that time comes each training day. But because our talks are not scripted, you'll then listen to us all kind of nerd out on each other's answers and venture into a lot of things beyond physical recovery, including like lifestyle rituals, stretching and mobility routines, mental readiness, and a whole bunch more. Brad, Berto, and I had a blast during this discussion, and I hope you guys do too. So as always, if you have any feedback or comments on this specific episode, you can leave them for us at 3dmusclejourney.com under podcast number 49. So here we go. This is the details that matter with Brad Loomis and Alberto Nunez. For those
I'll
listening,
try to mute my device when I get that way.
Well, no, we'll just tell everyone. For everyone listening, Brad is being a trooper right now, and he doesn't feel amazing. We'll start the podcast with that.
And I'm managing my recovery.
See, you're on recovery like 103 at least.
Mm-hmm.
What are we going to talk about today, Bert?
So I guess one thing that I brought up when we were kind of throwing around topics for today's talk was the fact that I think out of all of us, Andrea tends to be the most picky when it comes to things outside of training. And
yeah, we didn't talk about that prior to you starting this recording, but okay, I didn't know it was about me to start.
Well,
way to call me out.
You.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
Stuff to get all this. It's a good thing because you're aware of all the other components that go into a successful like training block outside of just like simply showing up. And I think if that's all you're really focusing on is like showing up and going beast mode while you're there, you're not going to get the most out of your training. There's so many other moving parts and so many other things that involve self-maintenance outside of the gym that are going to help you get the most out of yourself. So working about recovery and everything that you can do outside of the gym that could potentially influence the way you recover and you're able to progress within your training. And I think all of us here, we're probably going to share some anecdotes and go over what we like need to have in line in order to be successful athletes in the gym. And I think we're going to have some things in common for sure, but we'll definitely have our own little things here and there. And surely we'll go over some stories as well where we kind of go over what we have seen with our athletes and perhaps some things that we tend to see over and over are perhaps overlooked a bit more than we think they should be.
Yeah, and I'm just giving you shit, but he's right. I do have the most, I'm the neediest of all of us, I'm sure. Maybe just because I'm a girl, though, and it's not my fault. I'm lying.
No, I think you're just an athlete, and that's kind of how it is. I'm pretty sure at a very early age, you probably did the whole visualization thing, like without even knowing that it was something that like people do to get better.
No, we were told to do it.
Oh, okay.
I was taught by my coach at like 7, like, okay, you're up in 5, like 5 girls, go to the corner, visualize 5 routines, and then come back. We'll do a run through, and then you go on. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So there's so much more than just the actual action, right?
Yeah. But that was at a real early age.
I
didn't even think about that.
Of all of us, you're probably the most performance-oriented athlete of all of us, probably.
Yeah. Definitely cumulatively and now, right? So throughout my life, yes, because I started so early. And then because of the whole grid switch in the last year and a half, then yeah, I would say that. But if we were on that level playing field, right, when we were all just physique athletes, I was still probably the neediest. And that's okay. Okay, so everything besides training, and we don't want to say besides because obviously like that box is checked, right? You're doing your program, you're walking in, giving the best you can there. Should we start with training? Like,
I think we should. I think we should because there's that old saying that was floating around a while, like there's no such thing as overtraining, there's just undereating.
Okay, never heard that, but that sounds...
I've heard it's just like, yeah, right. There's a lot of guys that are probably not getting the most out of their training or eating a shit ton, and they're like, doing the fat bulking thing, and there's probably a better way for them to go about their ways. So I think we definitely need to at least give training a brief overview.
Okay. So, yeah. Brad, some of the common ways that you manage fatigue with your athletes, super broad. Can you give us like a list on your fingers of like things that we do with our athletes to ensure that they don't get overtrained or overreach too often and stuff like that?
Yeah, and I think probably because we deal so much with physique athletes that our dieting and our calorie restricted, I guess we should probably kind of start with them because they're the most obvious. But
okay.
Yeah, I mean, just like I think little things, like perhaps when the volume is up, and we're going through phases where maybe we need to kind of get that volume up, well, probably we better pick our shots a little bit and do that during times of a diet break, when we do give them more food, more high days, more carbs, whatever. And then obviously times when we need to dig, and we need to lose some pounds and we need to get some fat off. Maybe we do that during a period when we're tapering, or maybe we're even deloading. Mm-hmm. We can take some food away because it's maybe not quite so, we're not relying on it, nearly as much. And then sometimes we just we got to pick our shots as far as, because training is part of our life and vice versa. Some folks don't get as much sleep during times when, just scheduling doesn't permit it. People work, and so maybe when they're doing 7 on, 7 off, or something like that. Maybe we don't dig during the periods of time when they're on for 7 days in a row. Mm-hmm. Just I think probably things like that are things that we really need to pay attention to. And then a lot of times you hear of athletes, becoming injured during times when they were trying to keep up with their training and their programming, and then, they went on a vacation and they didn't get as much rest, or they were trying to, really enjoy life and soak it up. And so, they weren't really paying attention to those kinds of things, and boom, they get injured, things like that. I think those are all things that we need to pay attention to. What's food look like? What's life outside of training look like? All those kind of things are probably things that we need to pay attention to. So hopefully that answers your question.
Well, yeah, and I think a good way to sum that is that in all those scenarios, you're basically saying that you manipulate the training in accordance with life. You don't, especially when you have someone with weekly check-ins, right? It's never actually completely set in stone, right? It's you're aware of all the other things. And that training, as much as we'd like it to be set and like a robot sometimes, and often actually, especially if they're in prep, you make concessions in accordance to what's going on with them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, I think that's a good rule of thumb, but it's not the way we can totally do business either.
Right.
I think we need to be mindful But I mean, let's face it. There's times when you just got to suck it up.
Oh yeah, that's
And you got to say,
true.
look, you know what? We've done everything we can here, but this is a period of time when we just need to suck it up and we need to get the work done regardless of how we're feeling, you know. So I think that we need to be mindful of it, and maybe 75% of the time we try to adjust and auto-regulate accordingly, but it's not going to be perfect all the time. You know, when you're talking about an extreme sport like this, when things do tend to get extreme, you can't make all of the variables perfect.
Right.
And you know, you just that 25% of the time, you just got to do the best you can and know that you know it's gonna suck right now.
Right. So we have a plan, but if we're overly married to it, then we're not effectively honoring the recovery mechanisms and using them to the best of our abilities. Right. Yes. They're nodding for those who can't see them.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
They totally agree with me.
I'm just kidding. Like I was saying, you know, in order for us to get extreme levels of physique, you know, attainment or leanness or whatever you want to call it, yeah, we can't be married to the perfect scenario all the time either, you know. Yeah. So there's going to be times when it kind of stinks a little bit.
Anything to add, Bert?
I actually, this was part of a theme yesterday in my Instagram story.
Oh, hey.
Where, yeah, I went over how just planning your training ahead is not something that is still widely accepted when it comes to bodybuilders, which is very ironic. Yeah, it isn't. No. Most guys, most bodybuilders, if you were to just, you know, go take a survey at a show and like outside of how they lay things out, you know, over the course of a week, there's really not much planning ahead of that. And I find it very odd because it's going to be quite limiting to the athlete that wants to really push, you know, to get really, really close to their genetic ceiling. And, you know, I think bodybuilders, they do have experience when it comes to periodization, but it's more on the nutritional side. Mm-hmm. And they know that if they control these three variables, their fats, their carbs, and their protein, essentially their calories, that, you know, if they can, whenever they are stuck, they can manipulate that triangle to get what they want, right? So they can proceed to that next level. But it's still not very widely accepted when it comes to the training side of things. Like intensity, what is intensity? Most of them will tell you it's like, you know, well, my training partner yells at me a lot when I'm drop setting. It's pretty intense, right? So, you know, intensity, frequency, and volume, those things that most bodybuilders aren't really even taking that into consideration to balance those things. So when they do get stuck, or their situation, say they're deep into dieting, is a little bit different now, so that they can adjust that and then they can continue doing what they're doing and continue to move forward. It's something that managing fatigue is something that is still not in fashion. And I think kind of like what Brad was saying, like a fine time that I feel for bodybuilders to use this is because it is in the middle of a prep to perhaps get an intro to periodization. And this is because your body becomes a little bit more transparent. Like when I go back to myself maybe a decade ago, like when I was this like hotshot young 20-something, that, dude, I could do like 50 set leg workouts and I'll be there 3 days later, 2 days later, doing the exact same thing. And I was like kind of sort of like progressing over time anyways. And that worked well, even though I'm pretty sure there was a point where like I was going past that threshold where, you know, diminishing returns and perhaps even getting a slight negative adaptation. But generally speaking, I was still heading in the right direction. Right. But I was eating enough, and, you know, I was a young male, so, you know, I didn't really feel it. But then came contest prep. And then during contest prep, your body becomes a little bit more transparent to fatigue and to stress. And I think this is, I don't care who you say, who you are, and if you say that, for example, that like you don't feel it, that, you know, when you're dieting, when you're prepping, that like, no, it's all in your mind. Like I still train hard, you know, I'm intense. Like, no, it doesn't work that way. If you get hangry, if you have a harder time keeping up with all the usual things in life when you are prepping, that's stress that you can't keep up with. And the same should be taken into consideration when designing your training then. So it was kind of a challenge to a lot of the people out there who perhaps were kind of doing the whole YOLO type of training when it came to their off-season, and maybe they're prepping now. Like, now would be a fine time for you to run a periodization cycle, something that is periodized, that a plan is set for the next 4, 8, 12 weeks. Give that a try, and you're going to see how you are able to do more over the long term. And again, I do think that for those of people out there who are just like, taking the hammer to their bodies every single day, you are going to get more on that day, maybe that week, but long term, you're just going to have a hard time, I guess the equivalent of like, we'll say for a bodybuilder, breaking that 10% body fat. If you're not tracking those variables, you're going to have a hard time, getting to that next level. And what a good training program does is, it manages fatigue. It ensures that over the long term, you're recovering, and you're able to progress. So I think before we move into other things, I think your training needs to make sense. Otherwise, I don't care, how much deep tissue massages you're getting. I don't care how much you're meditating, how much you're sleeping, how much you're eating. It won't matter.
Yeah, and it's hard, especially when you're young and excited or relatively early, intermediate, and excited, to take deloads before you feel like you're beat the fuck up. I still honestly don't like it, but I think I'm a good enough trainee that I notice when it's like we went too many weeks, and that's been, I guess, a challenge as a coach that I've seen is I have a lot more people in their first maybe 5 years of competing than I do like very, very experienced athletes. And almost every single one of them hates deloading the same way I did 3-4 years ago, when it's like, I don't feel like I need it yet, especially if they're not like in deep prep. They're like, I'm just so bored of the gym. And I used to have that same thing. And they, it's like being thirsty, right? Where everyone's like, if you wait till you're thirsty, you're already dehydrated. It's like, if you wait till you feel like shit, you're kind of already in the negative. And so, I think developing, if nothing else, the habit of having some benchmark that you deload for some amount of time every X so often before you feel like trash, I think is like one of the most basic types of periodization you can do. If that's all you know, it's better than nothing, but it's probably one of the most important.
And a lot of times, like looking back at my history, when I really was truly over extending myself, a 1 week, even a week off from training was not enough. I had pushed so hard for so long that a 1 week off of training was like a speed bump. My body didn't even recognize it. It took like 2.5, 3 weeks of really low volume training just to get that fatigue level down to where I could even be, a normal trainee again.
Yeah.
A lot of times when you do wait until you feel like you need a deload, 1 week's not going to do it. Even your traditional structured deload is not going to do it. You're going to need to, put a little bit more thought into it. Probably run one that's a little bit longer.
Yeah, and something too, I guess if we're on the tail end of that conversation-ish, is that if you're like a deload is different than me. This is me personally. Like, we go to London for a week. That's not a deload, even though I only trained twice and I barely did anything, because everything else is going on a heightened level. That's not rest for me. Like, a deload means like it's a normal week. I'm at home sitting at my desk, and I used to have this habit too, where because I remember doing as a kid, right? On Saturdays I don't have practice, so what can I do? And I'd go like run cross country meets and be an idiot. And then there was a period of time where like I knew, and I wasn't working with Berto yet, like I knew enough that I needed to deload, but I was like, well, since I'm deloading, I'm going to get all this other shit done. I'm going to clean the house. I need to clean my closet finally, and since gym time is cut in half, and I'm going to run all the errands, and I'm going to clean all the things and move all the things and do all the, but it's still like, you're still working all week physically, and just, it's not the same.
So that's the good segue into the stuff that I guess happens outside of the gym. So we'll just assume that everyone listening to this, because this is like, what is this, podcast number what?
49.
49. So they should know that, like, hey, let's not YOLO it. Let's, like, you'll never get shredded if you're just kind of auto-regulating your nutrition. Same thing when it comes to training. You're not going to make it very far if you're just kind of, I go in and I listen to my body, bro. That's just not going to cut it. So we're going to assume that these people have that set in stone. I guess, what things do we all kind of do what are like, I guess in the proper order, like things that we do to make sure we expedite recovery?
I don't know. I don't know how to start that even. I could list like 10 things right now, but I don't think that's the best way to do it.
All right. All
What's
right.
okay? Biggest rock first. Sleep? Would you say sleep?
I'd say sleep is
Okay.
huge,
Okay.
huge, huge. Yeah, so big.
I think having worked for, now that I guess in the last like 3 or 4 years, made it a point to where I know not everyone can do this, but I made it a point to where my lifestyle fit my athletic goals. I
Hmm.
don't squeeze in my training like it's priority in my life, and then the rest of the shit goes in. Um, and I think now, after finally doing that and knowing how good I can feel without alarms ever, when I have to
Hmm.
wake up, it's like, oh my God, the end of the world. Like, I know how different it feels when I'm not rested now.
Hmm.
Um, so I don't know. And I sleep like 9 to 10 hours a day, unless there's like some weird thing going on. Usually in one big bolus. I'd say like
Yeah.
half the time. And then sometimes if I sleep like 6 to 7 hours, then I'll have a nap. Um,
There was a stint where I committed to the 60-hour sleep week for a while,
I remember that.
and man, was everything so much better. I think the what I noticed for sure my training, but you know how sometimes like little things in your day kind of bug you when it comes to your training. Like you're like, man, training's gonna suck because this project is running behind and I'm spending an extra hour on it that I didn't plan to. Things like that would gut me less. Like my response to just everyday stress was so much better, and I think that was somewhat unexpected. I did expect to go in there and feel fresher, and my nervous system is like, oh, I was going to feel twitchy, and kind of imagined all those things happening in the gym. But I think the biggest one was how little, not how little, but how much less just like everyday stresses actually affected me when I was well rested in regards to sleep.
Yeah. And I bet this is a challenge for you, Brad, because you have a family and then you travel for work often. Do you find that it's a problem for you?
Actually, no, but I think that I'm pretty darn rare in that I can sleep anywhere.
Yeah, you
I'm
can.
I'm this kind of rare breed that I mean, it doesn't matter where I am. I can fall asleep on a dime and I
I
can be
know.
drooling and be in deep REM sleep, in no time at all.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I mean I'm kind of I guess really lucky in that regard, and
Yeah.
that's probably why I do tend to do pretty good with my training and not get not get injured as much or what have you.
Yeah.
Um, because yeah, I mean sometimes I'll only get like on average 5 or 6 hours of sleep, but it's 5 or 6 hours of really restful, deep sleep that I will a lot of times get.
Yeah.
Shoot a nap sometimes. I can just drop out for a 20-minute nap sometimes, and I'll wake up with drool on my face and being disoriented. Where am I? And that's a pretty restful sleep. And I sometimes think that people they need to not only look at the amount of time they're sleeping, but how's the quality of that
Mm.
sleep too.
Yeah, good
Yeah.
point. What's interesting that you said, Bert, too, that it makes if some other project's keeping you longer from going to the gym and it like bothers you more or whatever. I think maybe a just as big stone or a bigger stone for me is that because I know that I cannot touch work till my training is done for the day. I can't do it. I just can't do it. Um, and I sound like a spoiled brat. I realize that now, but please remember that like my bodybuilding career started in like grad school and I was in there at the lab like 70 hours a week. Like I obviously had high level gymnastics all through grade school. Like I know that it wasn't always this way, but I think because I've learned for me how valuable all the things we're talking about today are, it is become such a huge priority in my life to, like I said, I've arranged my career in a very purposefully in order to be a better athlete. And I know not everyone can do that, but that was like the choice that I made. And because I know the value of all the things we're talking about, I attempt to maximize all these things when I can. And again, in one way you could say like, well, that must be nice or whatever. But at the same time, like, I dropped a PhD program to scrap away at internet business on my own. So it's all relative, is all I'm trying to say.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
Which was actually. Go ahead.
I think you kind of earned it, and there is something to doing more of the stuff you want to do in life and less of the shit that you don't want to do.
Thanks. But what I can say though is I think that was a big deal with my 2013 prep with you, was I was trying to figure out how the hell to survive financially once I did make that move. Like now it's a little easier, but then financially I was like, all right, I'm not going to be a doctor. I'm actually going to go be a YouTuber. And it turns out YouTube doesn't fund the life the way you think it would at first. And so that was hard. That was very stressful. And I guess since we're talking about that, very, very stressful. Same, I guess, 24 hours a day as I have now, but much higher stress level then. Because of that. So, time of day is where all that was going, right? When you train, I have to train before I go to work. That's it. I couldn't imagine working a 9 to 5 and then going to train. Like I know I've done it at some point in life, but right now the thought of that is like, oh God, I would be so much worse in the gym.
You're making me reconsider what time I train. Yeah, when I reverse my schedule, like something more like the way you have yours set up, I'm just much more productive afterwards. So I train later, do work early in an effort to be more productive. It's like earn that training session, but it ends up working the other way around. I feel, at least from what I've seen so far, in like these small instances here and there. But it's kind of the same thing with sleep. I think people sometimes will sacrifice sleep so that they can do more, or at least that's the way they see it. But I've noticed it when I've tried to do that myself with sleep. Like, you know what, this whole week is just going to be 5 hours across the board because I need to get all this done. It's just like you're just not as productive. Like your computer time, your creative brain it's just not flowing the same.
Yeah. So I've kind of adopted that with everything too. Like say I do finish my training and I'm sitting down to work and I'm an hour into it and I start getting sleepy, I'll go take a nap because I know if this next hour of work, if I'm sitting here tired, will take 3 hours for no reason other than that I'm just. So I think that's a good point. Like you think that you're. Some people think that sleeping is like wasting time when it's making your awake time that much more effective. Is how I feel.
Yeah, and just for the person out there, they might be like, well, me, it's different. Oh, that's fine, you're different, but that's just not how it works for most people, from what I've seen.
Yeah.
So there are a few people that can thrive that way, but most people, even the ones who think they can, like once you give those instructions to an athlete, like, you know what, let's do that sleep thing this whole week. They come back and they're like, wow, like,
or what I see with my athletes a lot too that have very crazy schedules, get up at 5 to go to the gym, to go to and they go to bed at like 10 p.m. and they, if they have a really crazy work family schedule, every weekend they have low weigh-ins because, I get that they might be weighing in a little bit later, but I mean like way lower weigh-ins if they're really busy during the week because it's like their body's like releasing, and like, because it includes Monday morning, right? Monday morning they'll wake up early, but they're rested from the weekend and so they end up just like being heavier gradually throughout the weekdays, and then they'll drop, and then won't drop, and then will every weekend. So I've seen that with a couple of my athletes that have very crazy schedules. And
sometimes you can even see that.
Yeah.
Like you can actually see that in really lean bodybuilders. You can actually see them holding on to that products of stress in their physique. So I know, because I think Bert, I think you were the one that actually taught me that. I had an athlete that was like finally getting rest because he took the week off before his competition, and he was getting sleep, and he was not stressed out. And I was like, well, this guy literally looks like he's dropped about 3 pounds of fat. And I think, Bert, I think I was at your house, and I think when you used to live in Sacramento, and you said, "Oh, well, what's changed this week?" And I told you that he'd taken the week off, and he goes, "Yeah, I bet you he's just with the lower stress levels, he's actually dropped a lot of that stuff, lactic acid and cortisol and all those products of stress, and it's probably showing up on his physique." And I've been more attuned to that ever since.
Well, I do the opposite into every show. I stress bloat myself in every stage appearance. It's real great. We laugh, but it's true, and Bert knows it's true.
It's true.
It's true. I don't feel stressed out, but like the excitement and the travel and the whatever, and I'm just like, cool. I look better like the Monday before every time I get on stage.
We're just going to surprise you with a show one day. You're going to show up at the gym for your favorite workout.
Actually, we paid the entry fee. We're just going to pick you up. It's in about 5 hours maybe. You just show up. Yeah. But it's real. And I see the shit side of it every time. I don't know if that's like the fight or flight, or like maybe that's good, right? Well, like my powerlifting meet, I did like the best ever. But so it's like, I think it's, maybe I know how to turn it on and I get in that heightened state, but unfortunately my physique looks like shit, but I guess cost benefits, whatever.
Yeah. The fight or flight response, it works, but it doesn't always look really good on people.
Yeah.
But I guess this kind of goes into what I keep hearing is routine. I think there's something to having routine, and that's probably going back to myself a decade ago. That's probably something that I severely overlooked. I remember I had like 4 or 5 different training buddies, and it's like, I'll meet this guy at 4. This guy trains at midnight.
Yeah.
If I want to train with this person, I can only train on Saturday. I never train on Saturdays, but I'll do it. But I think as you start to like get deeper into training, and it becomes, you become more of an athlete, you need your rituals,
Oh, I love rituals.
And that involves a lot of weird routines that I think all of us here most likely have, whether we want to share them or not. It's kind of up to the...
I can tell you
what do you
mine.
got?
I'll tell you about mine. I the first 5 hours of my day at least is being an athlete. So again, we can talk shit if you want, but it's it's what I did on purpose. So right now, and again, it wasn't like this, another caveat, it wasn't like this when it was just bodybuilding or powerlifting. It's just some things I've adopted in the past year because I'm asking a whole lot more of myself every day. So I wake up when I wake up. It's pretty rare that I'll use an alarm for anything. Then I get ready. While I'm getting ready, I'm always listening to an audiobook. Like I brush my teeth, wash face, try to look like a human. And then I eat the same breakfast every day, the exact same breakfast in the exact same place. Again, with my headphones in, listening to whatever. And then as soon as I'm done with breakfast, I go to living room and I do the same 30 minutes of stretching / mobility work, stretching and rolling. I do it at home because I train at a CrossFit gym and it's hot as balls in Texas. So, but I start sweating as soon as I get there, and I'm not going to sit there for an hour stretching in my own puddles. And that's another way I manage fatigue, right? I used to stretch at the gym and I was like, I'm sweating and I haven't even done anything. So I do all that because the drive is like 5 minutes. And so then I'll drive to the gym. But yeah, that in itself is like an hour and a half. And then I have the same 10 minutes of dynamic warm-up-ish. And then, like with bands and like squats and circles and like all that stuff. And then I'll get into my specific movement warm-up for whatever is my first lift of the day or whatever. But from the time I wake up till my like movement-specific warm-up is probably 2 hours. Always the same. I won't do anything, and there are other things like within that. There's rules, like I won't do anything before the gym. I will not run an errand before I get my training in. But I don't. Again, like if I had to run one, would it ruin me like for life? No. But it's just like I hate making decisions I don't have to make. I want every bit of me as fresh as possible going in there.
I'm kind of the same way with my meals. Like I need to have X amount of like I need to stimulate protein synthesis X amount of times before I make it into the gym. And like for me, the magic number is three.
3
And it
feedings
kind of
before you go?
feedings, yeah, and it kind of makes sense if you look at just like the mechanistic side of things. But I also feel that like when I haven't been hungry throughout the day and I've been fed over and over, I tend to crash a lot less during the training session when I get to that halfway point. So for me, kind of like you, it's like the first, I'd say 6-7 hours of the day are almost dedicated to eating or eating protein exclusively.
Interesting. When I was just doing powerlifting bodybuilding, though, I would eat on the way to the gym or like as close as I could to gym time because of that. But now, because my training has like hopping or running or whatever, like it's not just lifting. There's usually things where I'm like very quickly moving at a high intensity and then my stomach. So then now it's moved, right? So it's breakfast, then the big hour long of like getting ready. Whereas it used to be, I don't know, it used to be different. I used to be able to eat right up to my training session and I liked that. And now, because like I'm not jumping rope on like an 800 calorie belly. I'm just not. So I just switched it around. Okay, Brad, go.
I think I'm almost the exact opposite of you, Andrea, in that, I a lot of times, and again, this is the lifestyle that we've chosen, but, I train 75-80% of the time right here in my back bedroom.
Yeah.
I'll get all my work done for the day, get it all out of the way, get it all done. Usually I'll go eat a couple of times. As soon as I'm done with my work, I go lay down and either watch TV with the kid and just chill out for sometimes as long as 2 hours.
Uh-huh.
And then I'll just work out all night. I'll start at like 9:30, 10 o'clock, and I'll just train until 2 or 3 in the morning.
Yeah.
And I'm not in any rush.
Yeah.
I pretty much enjoy every time. Like you though, I do need a lot of time to warm up.
Yeah.
And it's kind of the same thing as you do. I guess I don't put as much time into stretching, because that's one thing I'm picky about is I do my stretches outside of my training time. And I think this is actually a little precursor to my blog post that's coming out.
Okay.
And what I do to keep my spine healthy since I'm all crooked and jacked up. But I don't do as much stretching. My stretching is allocated into times outside of the gym, and that's one of the things that I try to not do, pre-training. But I'll do my air squats and my overhead squats and get all that foam rolling and all that dare mobility work and movement prep, and then after that I'm good. I'll just squat all night, or
well, I think
do what I need. Even when I'm in Reno, I'll do the same thing. I don't do as much work because I don't have as much time. But usually I'll get up, have a cup of coffee, do my couple of clients, get that all done, get some food in me, then head to the gym in American Iron there in Reno and get my training done.
Yeah, I think it speaks to I have like emotional mental work problems. So like if I have the reason I think that I have to, one of the reasons I have to gym first is one, I feel good, but another is when the training for the day is done, if I want to do like one extra funsy movement, okay, but it's never like, it's like a skill based something. Like I want to do this thing on the rings or whatever, right? But I'll never, like I have my assignment and I do my assignment and then I go, right? But when it comes to work, I will work until it's bedtime no matter, because I feel like there's always something I could be doing. Like, and I think because you see it like you have your roster, you take care of your roster and you feel complete, right? And I think because I have so many weird other duties that it's like roster's done and now the creative or meetings with Rizzo or Steve or like getting Brandon to make this new image for this thing or like I'll never feel done. So if it was like I'm going to get work done and then go, I would just like never go or I'd be like going to train and still have more when I come back. So it's like I used to try to do that. Like when I lived in California for a while, I would be like, I'm going to write for 2 hours and then go to the gym. But like while I'm writing, other things would come up that I would need to do. And I would like get sidetracked and I'd be like, shit, now it's been 4 hours and now I'm hungry and I can't train. So I don't, yeah, I have a very, I don't know how to explain work with me, but it's, I can't stop working. And I think that's why I could never do it before effectively.
That's a key point.
Know thyself.
Yeah.
We keep saying that, but it's true. I mean,
yeah.
Just being observant of what feels good and what doesn't too. I think that's part of like your job would be like journaling wherever you track your training, right? Notes are important. It's not just the numbers. It's like, I feel like shit today. What did I eat? My back feels funny again today and it felt funny Monday. What do those 2 days have in common? Like, shit like that I think some people kind of miss is looking for patterns when things are exceptionally good or disturbingly bad. Like, why could that possibly be?
That's exactly what I was going to interject with, was just the fact that a lot of this setting yourself up outside of athletics comes from you being an athlete and applying it to the other things in life. So,
yeah. What else, Bert?
Well, one thing that Brad said that it kind of clicked with me is like the injury prevention side of things. Like, okay. I think I've been hurt enough, and then I've thought I was cured, and then I find out I wasn't exactly cured. That like now I know that that's the most exciting part of my week. I like to, eat protein and train and sleep and all that stuff is I really accept as part of my schedule. But the injury prevention, the stretching, the working on questionable parts of my body, like to make sure they stay healthy. That is something that has become part of my routine. Whereas 4 or 5 years ago, I don't think I probably had the need for it then, but I wasn't ready to accept that now at that point in time. And now it's to the point where, kind of like you with your patterns, it's like, it's like when I don't do it, what ends up happening is eventually your hot streak ends because of something you could have prevented at some point, So I think that's something that on my rest days, I try to stay on top of. I try to keep my right hip flexor loose. My right QL is chronically tight. Try to make sure that, I think right now my shoulders, for example, they're tight. They're like good bodybuilder tight, but they shouldn't be any tighter than this because then I get hurt. So, all that little self-maintenance work that is very, very easy to skip out on, and maybe get away with it like, a week here, a week there. That has become a big part of, I guess, my rituals outside of the gym over the last 2-3 years.
Yeah.
I've been relatively healthy, like all things considered. Yeah.
Yeah. What else, Bert? Lead us.
I don't get cracked by the chiro. I don't get much deep tissue. I think some people do that. I've never noticed much of a difference. I think all the maintenance work that I do, I can, for the most part, do on my own. I think one thing that I do plenty of, and I just absolutely need, we talk about visualizing and imagining, what it's going to feel like when you unrack that weight, what it's going to feel like at the bottom, but you're thriving and your homies are yelling at you, go, 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 or no, they yell up, 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 and lifting. I think one thing that I definitely need is just time away from the sport. So I need at least one day a week where, I don't know, I'm like at the tap-in handle with my friends having nachos, and not once is weightlifting being brought up. Yeah. I think that is a big part of like the whole like we talked about. We opened up with like fatigue management and managing your stress, and I think that's a big one, is being able to dedicate some time outside of your training where like you're completely like not allowed to think about it almost. I think that, at least for me, that's huge. That's huge. And then when I come back to the gym, it's like, oh, that's right. I forgot. I love you. I'm happy to love again,
You're mistress of nachos. I don't know if I have to have things outside the gym too. There's been plenty of times where I didn't, but I found it to be useful, yeah. But I don't know if I can say that it makes or breaks or makes a difference to my training. I don't know.
I didn't want it at first. At first, like all that time spent away from weightlifting was just something that people would make me do, or just like that. And then I just started to notice the trend where I'm like, shoot, I didn't think about weightlifting or training like this whole. I didn't even look at my physique once this whole Sunday. What is wrong with me? And then I would have a really great training session come Monday, and I'm like, maybe there's something to removing yourself from this, because otherwise, as much as you love, I feel for me, as much as I love thinking about training, examining my physique to see how it's doing, even though it hardly changes at this point, it gets to the point where it just becomes that chronic deadline that's like looming in your head. And by removing myself from it for a while, it's like coming back to the computer. Like I sit down and I'm like, oh, that's right. Like, let's get to flowing. So for me, that's really big.
Yeah. I wonder if I don't feel that need, because once this shit is done for the day, like I really love work, and I don't feel like I think, even when I'm writing about like something for the 3D site, I don't feel like I'm thinking about training. I feel like I'm trying to work with words. I don't know. I feel detached from the gym, even when I'm doing 3DMJ work, even though I realize that we're bodybuilding coaches. I don't know.
How you perceive
Well, and
stress?
I can almost kind of...
Go ahead, Brad.
Well, I was just going to say, I can kind of almost imagine you being totally immersed in what you're doing there too. I can almost see you just like losing track of the time of day, where you're at. And so, yeah, that could be very well your time away from training right there.
Yeah.
Is that you're totally enthralled in what it is that you're doing. And let's face it, it's our business, it's our kind of our livelihood, but at the same time, it's very different. Like with us, we're manipulating programming and things like that, whereas you've got this creative model of all these different things that you're doing that are very different than what we're doing, and I just see you just like working for days and be like, oh my God, it's Tuesday.
Yeah, like I think that, again, this is why I freaking love, another reason why I had to have my own podcast, whatever. I love that you said that, because I've never thought about it, but I don't think it's just the way I approach my training that people are like, all right, dude, whatever, crazy. I think that's how I approach work too. It's like whatever I'm doing at the moment, if I don't feel like I'm doing it, whatever it is, like real hard, then I don't feel like it's worth doing. Or I don't like even, I don't tiptoe well. I fucking throw into like whatever it is, whether that is, again, writing or podcasting or training or whatever. And if I feel like it's, like I said, if I'm like, there's times where I'm like, okay, I'm going to write this article, and it's like, oh shit, there was 3 hours. But then there's also times where if I've like, say, I don't know, I have to make 3 pages on the 3DMJ website, and like maybe 30 minutes into it, I find myself getting a little tired, then I'll just leave. Like I'll leave the desk. So it's like, if I can't do it 100, then I just won't do it at that moment, because I feel like I'd be better at it when I'm ready to do it 100%. That was off topic, but I thank you for helping me realize that, Brad, because I never really thought about that. That's how I get with like everything, not just training. What else, Bert? This is your podcast, bro.
Yeah, it is. Let's see.
No pressure, but I don't know what to talk about.
Yeah. I think it's what this all kind of revolves around is like being physically prepared by the time you get to the gym,
Right.
And I think it's all these things that we do a bit differently. Like,
right.
I don't think I could do what you do. I don't think you could do what I do. I don't think I could do what Brad does and like thrive. Right. But we all in some way have kind of modeled our lives to excel as athletes. And I think everyone, even the person that works a 9 to 5, there's got to be certain things that they do within their schedule to make it happen as an athlete.
Like or things they could do.
Or things they could do, exactly. So it's I think it's it's important that outside of your, well thought out training block, that you take all these other things into consideration, so that you can get the best results when it comes to your training. So I guess I would say we've touched upon like the pre, I guess. I guess for me, the post was like, spending time away from training, like really far away when it's time to.
Yeah, because you go out to dinner like every night with your homies, right? Almost.
Quite frequently. It kind of sucks now because like now they realize I'm a bodybuilder, because I'm like, hey guys, I actually at some point I do prep, and and I have to be a little bit more picky about, it's like, hey, well, it's been kind of fun sitting here with you guys for 5 hours with my diet soda, but I gotta go back home.
Yeah.
Because I really need my sleep at this point. But yeah, I think being observant of things that you can do, outside of the gym that affect your training in a positive way, I think is really important as an athlete. Like one thing that I need to get back to, for example, that I completely cut out, and it's funny because Ian McCarthy said this, and I'm like, that's right, that's where I was like last summer, and this was I cut out my caffeine completely, and I was training without caffeine. And the point he brought up is that sometimes caffeine lets you train much harder than you can recover.
Oh, yeah. That's a good point.
You
got yourself so jacked up that you don't feel the fatigue that's supposed to be there.
Like our PE9 was 3 reps ago, dude. Like I think that was a fine point, especially if because again, when you are training, you're not working out, you're not exercising. It's not about having a great like training. It's not about going really hard on that day. It's like you step back, you look at your training block. Was this productive? And sometimes supplementing. I know for me with caffeine, what it does is it over the long term. Like I might net more here acutely, and I'm like I'm in the zone. I feel great. Like my eyes get that wide. But when I look back at the trail I left, I'm like, man, like I kind of ran myself into the ground at this point here, and I never really came back and got everything that I felt I should have gotten from this training cycle. So it's like little things like that I think really come in handy, like for an athlete who wants to learn to be more self-aware as an athlete.
That's a good point. But speaking of not just caffeine, but like I should also say a thing that luckily my absurd brain helps me do as an athlete or whatever. I take the same supplements at the same time every day. Mm-hmm. That's like how much does creatine cost? Like nothing,
Yeah.
And how many people though tell you like I have creatine and just forget to take it all the time, and it's like, bruh, set an alarm. Like that's a easy. See, Bert's one of the people I know. Jeff, same thing, right? And y'all are like top bodybuilders in the world, and it's like, come on. There's like, is it gonna make or break you? Probably not, but could it be an easy 1%? Probably.
Yeah.
So we're not saying that you have to do like every single thing we do, but it's like, where are those little 1%ers around your life that could be easy enough? And I should say too that with forgetting, like I have an app that reminds me to take my melatonin and vitamin D every night. Like for whatever reason, I keep my pills by pills. Wow, like the supplements tablets that I take, right? I keep them like as a location trigger, right? They're where I make my food every day. So like with everything that's supposed to be eaten like with a meal, I don't forget it because it's like staring me in the face on the counter. And then like at night, I don't like eating super late, but I want to take a melatonin like an hour-ish before bed, so I have an alarm that goes off. And it's like, and if sometime, like last night though, I was doing a podcast with Ian McCarthy. During it, my alarm went off. And like last night, because I was at my computer, like I didn't take my melatonin, which only happens like once every couple weeks, But it's like most nights, that's really effective for me. Is that I noticed that of all of my supplements, I would forget the nighttime ones because it wasn't with food, and I'm like, okay, well, how can I fix this? And so I bought an app that reminds me every night, and like, meh. And I guess I drink the same amount. I drink my creatine and beta-alanine within my workout drink every day. And I make that along with the same breakfast I make every day. So I think with all those things, I guess an overall technique that I use is I put shit in the same place. You'd think it's kind of easy, but like even like Brandon will forget, and he lives with me, and he forgets his shit all the time. Not to call him out, but like we're just different personalities. But those are the things, and I don't know. I think I just like figuring shit out, which works in my favor. I'm like, if I'm forgetting this, what can I do to not? Mm-hmm. If this keeps getting missed, what can I do? Like, I don't know.
When you've been very in tune with what works for you and what you can actually probably feel too. Like you probably have noticed when I do this, things go good, like Bert was talking about.
Yeah, I guess to speak with as another global thing is I do journal, note, obsess about data, look for patterns. But I think it's because I'm so, I guess, robotic with everything. You're right, it's easier to notice when things are off. Mm-hmm. So I guess that's it. It's like you don't have to do a whole life overhaul. It's just what can you add this week, and once you got that down, what can you add next week, and or maybe next month or whatever. Because when Bert met me, I was taking all kinds of crazy shit. Not like steroids, but I was like taking CLA and like arginine and like all this stuff. He was like, I just needed to take your multis and your vitamin, what was it, and your fish oils and like stop everything else. And I was like, no. But I did it. I did it because he said to, but it's not like I'm saying I'm so great and I figured this out. Like I fuck it up all the time too. Sometimes I'll marry myself to the things that don't matter or whatever. So it's like not always the best, but it literally is just like how I operate.
And I think you use that to like your advantage. And for example, there's certain things that Brad does that he uses to his advantage.
Right.
You know, and I think for those people listening, it's like, hey, don't necessarily like do what Andrea does, don't do what Brad does, but like look at your, daily routines and yeah, like you said, like see how many of those 1% like you can rack up here and there. And I'm not a big believer in like, hey, this is like the golden ticket to like that next level, but I think especially if you're really interested in like maximizing yourself, a lot of those little 1% here and there, like, man, it adds up. It adds up over the course of a long time.
Yeah. One of the drawbacks is, like you said, when we do travel, though, I'm fucked up. I'm like, God. Like, I'm obviously, like, I can deal with it, but I don't like it. I don't like when my routine's off. Not that any of us do, but obviously if I'm that much more regimented, then I'm that much more effective when I'm not on it. So it's, whatever, cost benefit again.
And people are like, you're so lucky you get to go to Australia. And I'm like, shoot, my sleep pattern, like, I know it's going to be messed up it's like the worst place to fly to in terms of like sleeping. Like, dude, I hit a deadlift PR out there. And it was like 507 or 510 for like 11 reps last time we went. And I'm like, I'm freaking unbeatable. I'm unbreakable. I'm like this and that. And then I come back and dude, I was like, just like, no, you're not, dude. You were I was messed up for like a good like week and a half, I think. So
yeah. And one thing that I did want to kind of bring up is when you do find that one thing that is like a little bit more than a 1%. That one thing that might be like 4 or 5%, kind of like Andrea did. She kind of found out that some of those things were important enough that she needed to work it into her life and work it into some way to where it was part of her schedule and her way that she could not forget it. You know what I mean? Because I know one thing for me that has really helped, my overall consistency with training is getting out of that chair over there and moving myself over here. Yeah. When I recognize that I better standing or laying down flat as opposed to sitting, that's big. For me, that was huge. And I built that into my life. And I got out of that chair and I moved myself over here. And I'm over here standing up 6 or 8 hours a day. That was huge. And I recognized that. And I just decided, you know what? That is big enough that I need to build that into my life. And it's been, kind of one of those big ticket items that I've recognized. And when you do recognize that, I think you need to at least, you're doing yourself a disservice if you don't make the attempt to capitalize on that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point. Are you talking in terms of like your hips and back, or like when,
Mm-hmm.
okay. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, when I was
Interesting.
running an upper lower split on my lower days,
Mm-hmm.
those were days where I would really be on top of like making sure I didn't stay in one position all day. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I think that there's something to be said for like the acknowledgement that I realize not everyone can do all these things. Like I get that. But at the same time, I think this is like a super like just my philosophy is that I think for all the span of people that listen to this, be that someone who just started lifting, someone who just kind of wants to look good, or someone who like is a competitive athlete, I think your response to this conversation can kind of tell you where your goals are too, right? Like if you hear this and you're like, those people are crazy, then like no offense, but you probably shouldn't be a competitive bodybuilder. You know what I mean?
Yep.
If you hear this conversation and you're like, oh shit, maybe I do need to start doing some of these things, or I already do that, I'm covered, or like, they make me feel less crazy because I do a lot of these things too, then I think that that's great. But this is just something I've been thinking about lately is like a lot of people that consume our content that are very green that say, man, I want to look like a fitness model. Blah, blah, blah. But if you hear all this shit and you think we're crazy and that's way too much, then understand that you might not ever get where this fitness model physique that you're thinking or whatever. And I think that that's something that people like about our podcast. And I think you said that someone told you this, but it was like, we talk about things that you didn't know or whatever. Or was that you, Brad?
Mm-hmm.
Someone said that someone had commented like I like the 3D podcast because y'all talk about things that I didn't even know I didn't know. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that this is one I'm so glad you brought it up, Bert, because I think a lot of people miss that it's bodybuilding, just like powerlifting, just like anything that you want to be really good at. It's not just in the gym, it's your life. And if you don't want it to be your life, then you, not in a shitty way, this might not be a priority for you the way you think it is, and you might not get what you want out of it. Is
I love
all.
when you like that. That's so like that's exactly what I needed to hear because it's true. It's like it's. I think there'll also be a few people listening to this are like, that's right, I am not crazy. Like this is just what I love, and there's absolutely like nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
So that's very well put.
Thanks,
And
dude. That means a lot.
That was kind of one of the things that always appealed to me about being an athlete is all that stuff that you need to do outside of your training in the gym. I remember when I was a kid and I was always thinking, how cool would it be to be in love with something so much that it's something that you are aware of all the time. You know what I mean? And that
Mm-hmm.
you kind of make your life intertwined in with that thing. And that was one of the things that always appealed to me. And yeah, I think you're right. I think that if you're that kind of person, then you might fit that niche quite nicely.
Well, I get surprised. I think because I'm getting better at seeing that. Like I didn't know I sounded crazy. I thought before meeting Bert or whatever, I thought this is what all the bodybuilders did. I thought I was like behind, and then I found out that like I'm kind of like we're talking about now. I'm like overly covering all my bases. Whereas I thought like, what else do I need to do? What else do I need to do? Like this is a tamed down version of me, which is even scarier,
Hmm.
right? Which is even scarier when I talk about it, but it
Well,
is.
that came down. I think you've just consolidated because there's things that I still kind of do. Like there's this one shirt that I have to wear when I squat heavy because it's my squat shirt, and I'm like it doesn't hurt anyone, but it doesn't really work that way, dude, and you know it. And
Okay.
I think that's all you've done over the years is you've just kind of narrowed it down to the stuff that like really really works, and you focus on that.
Yeah, that's true. It's not that I've tamed it down. It's just maybe I've paid enough attention that I can let go of some things that don't matter. And, yeah, cool, man. Did we miss
I
anything?
I think that's it. I think we probably lost about 10% of our listeners
because they think we're fucking crazy now.
Yeah, they're gonna go check out the toning podcast. How to tone.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys. Thanks, Bert, for the great topic.
Yeah. That was fun. That was therapeutic.
All right. We'll see y'all next week.